Hello! Welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Since the beginning of the year, I've been focusing on Les Filles Mariées, the Marriageable Girls series, as a way of accompanying my other series, Les Filles du Roi, which I've been doing for a few years. The Marriageable Girls came before, and their stories are really, really kind of deep and interesting. But before we begin episode 30, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. All of that helps my logarithms. The next three are ways to help the channel grow. We have Super Thanks, which is right on your dashboard that you can click on. YouTube lets me do that now because I've reached over 1,000 subscribers, so thank you so much. We have Coffee, that's kind of like a one-time payment. And we have Patreon, that's a monthly subscription that you can elect different levels at. So thank you to all of you who have partaken of these options thus far. And let's get to know our Filles Mariées, episode 30. So Les Filles Mariées, 1634 to 1662, were clearly the beginners of the colony of New France. Les Filles du Roi arrived in 1663. Les Filles Mariées were the ones who came and tried to populate the colony for 28 years, and they came individually. They were, obviously meant to marry, and that was their soul and intent. They didn't know who they were going to marry, but there was usually somebody, that they were spoken for. Usually it was a priest or a entrepreneur or seigneur who paid for their passage. They would come one or two at a time, but by 1662, the colony was not thriving, and the government stepped in and said, you know what, we need to create a program, and thus was born Les Filles du Roi. But these Filles Mariées, they were amazing ladies. And so, and I have said, and I have repeated, if Les Filles du Roi are the founding mothers, Les Filles Mariées are the founding grandmothers. They truly are the rock that Quebec lies on. So episode 30, Jeanne Cerisier, is a viewer request, but of course I found when I looked in my files that I am also a descendant of Jeanne's, and I looked at the boy next door, the boy I grew up next to and still friends with. He is also a descendant. And then one of my teenage friends and young adult best friends, that is also her great-grandmother. So I was surrounded. We were descendants, all of us, together, but didn't know it. Let's get to know Jeanne a little bit better. So Jeanne was born in 1637 in a place called Amboise, France. Her parents were Jacques Cerisier and Marie de Lalande. Now she is from the region of France known as Centre de Val de Loire, which of course means in the center. You can clearly see it's in the center of France. And her département is part of Indre-et-Loire, which is kind of like the county. Historically, it can date itself back to the 5th century. It was once the area where the French royals and their court would reside. The château at Amboise, picture on your bottom left, was where Mary, Queen of Scots, called home. Can you imagine? Leonardo da Vinci lived at Château du Clos between 1516 and 1519, and he is buried in a crypt near the Château d'Amboise. Who knew? The Edict of Amboise, 1563, was also signed here. The parish church was Church of Saint Denis. Pictures on the bottom right comes from the 12th and was rebuilt in the 15th century. In the middle, I just kind of took out some pictures of what it looked like. It's just classic French countryside kind of little downtown pictures. Just amazing little village. So Jeanne's voyage to New France was a little different. She arrived on July 24th, 1663, with Louis Rouet de Villeray, who worked as a secretary to the governor Jean de Lauzon, as well as other duties that he did. But she was kind of paid, a paid companion or a paid assistant. The groom that she would select and who would select her, his name was François Duclos, and he was born in 1627 in Manerbe, France. His parents were Charles Duclos and Madeleine Boutard, and he was born in the Normandy region of France, found in the Calvados um, département, as you know, and it means county. The church of the village, Église Saint-Jean-Baptiste, dates from the 15th century. Currently, there are under 600 people that live there. Very small little community, but classic, that sort of Normandy village. Years after she arrives, um, Jeanne is, permitted to marry or finds her François. I'm not sure how that happened, but certainly November 29, 1665, at Cap de Madeleine, they are married. So they settled down at Cap de Madeleine first. It was founded, Cap de Madeleine, in 1651. The establishment was named by Jacques de la Ferté, who was the abbot of Sainte Madeleine de Châteaudun in France. The city is famous for its Basilique Notre-Dame du Cap, dedicated to Our Lady of the Cape. The Basilica receives thousands of pilgrims and visitors each year. Pilgrims are drawn to the site because it is considered to be the place where two miracles were performed by the Blessed Virgin Mary. The first being the miracle of the ice bridge in 1879, and the other being the miracle of the eyes, 1888. So you can imagine how many years this has been, a place of worship. You can see the coast. I'd love to show you this picture, just of the coast of Cap de Madeleine, because obviously it pretty much looks the way that they would have seen it as well. And we have the 1667 census, or 1666 census, I'm sorry. François Duclos, 37, and Jeanne, 30, and they have one son. They have a son, Nicolas, who is 1 year old at the time. So the history of Batiscan begins with our old friend Champlain, who met up with a native man named Batiscan in 1609, and by 1612 he had named this area Batisquam. In 1636, the seigneurie was granted to Jacques La Ferté, at which time it was called Madeleine. By 1639, it was divvied up again and given to the Jesuits. Hence, the area really did not grow until 1666, when settlers began to arrive. Prior to 1670, the inhabitants met at the home of Lieutenant Nicolas Rivard de la Vigne. Between 1670 and 1674, there was a wooden chapel that was constructed, and by 1684, they finally had the parish of Saint François Xavier de Batiscan, and the church is formed. Love to know that Nicolas Rivard, who is a descendant of mine, and a great grandfather of mine, was with François and Jeanne. So just kind of neat how the families connect up. And obviously, I'm a descendant of Jeanne, and so they would have gotten to know Nicolas as well. And just, I like the stories. I love to know that they connected the dots. And then we have the 1681 census. We have François, who is 50 years old. We have Jeanne, who is 40. Their children, Nicolas, Anne, Geneviève, Louise, François, Madeleine, Marguerite. They have one gun, 4 bêtes à cornes, which are goats, and 8 arpents valeurs, which means about 6 acres of land. So they would have 8 children in all. Their firstborn, Nicolas, would marry Marie-Madeleine Lafont, and he would have 2 children, both of whom would make it. He would become an engagé out west and also a seigneurial judge at Batiscan. Anne would marry François Gignac and have 11 children, 8 of whom would make it. Geneviève would marry Pierre Perrault and have 12 children, 10 of whom would make it. Marie-Louise would marry Nicolas Gabriel Lefebvre and have 12 children, 11 of whom would make it. François would also become an engagé out west and marry Marie-Charlotte Dutot and have 4 children, all of whom would make it. Marie-Madeleine would not marry, but did have a natural child with Julien Trottier, a son who did live. Marguerite would marry Jacques Dutot and have 9 children, 6 of whom would make it. Charles would become an engagé out west, but would return to Batiscan, where he passed away at 21 years of age and did not have any children. Jeanne would die first at Batiscan in September of 1709. She was 62 years old. They had been married 44 years. Francois himself would follow just a little over 2 years later, in 1711. He was 84 years old. They are both buried at Betska. And by 1729, they would have 121 descendants. We are lucky to have François Duclos is part of a profile that is in this the book four of our French Canadian ancestors that can be found on the Facebook group, or in the book if you have it. Our Free French Canadian Ancestors has that file for you so you can read more about it. Here we come to the most interesting part sometimes of genealogy, the names. Arose by any other name. Now, what's interesting about Duclos is that the names that you can find this family in are nothing like Duclos. We have Belrose, we have Betterdy, Carignan, Cauchois, Selle, de Bourdin, de Selle, Selle, et Vallier. And this is usually attributed to the D names that people affix to it, and so it just over many hundreds of years it becomes these names. So this is very, very interesting, and if you find one of these variations, I'd love to hear about it. And this is taken from volume 4, page 103 in our Free French Canadian Ancestors. Here are some of the resources I use. I want to focus on the Quebec Family History Society. This is one that is focused in Quebec. So this is something that you would like to, if you'd like to explore some of their resources, go on their website and have a look at what you can do if you're in Quebec, if they have any other resources that you can use as well. So I would encourage you to check that out under the, I believe it's qfhs.ca. So check that out, and all the other resources are also listed in the notes section. And so ends episode 30. Jeanne Cerisier is obviously someone who was a founding pioneer of Betska with her husband. And I am very excited to go to this area this summer. That is one of my principal areas to go and visit Betska. Just amazing because I descend from so many of her children. So obviously she's a very strong influence in my life. So for that, we thank her, and we thank her bravery and her courage and her tenacity. And obviously she made a life. She made a life for herself, and she was able to create a legacy of 121 descendants, of which I am now speaking to you for. So I want to say thank you, Grandmama Jeanne. I am grateful and blessed that I am a great-granddaughter of yours. And before I let you go, I want to say thank you to my patrons and supporters. Thank you. I couldn't do what I do without your encouragement and support. It really means the world to me. Until I see you on episode 131, au revoir.